Imagine stepping onto a sunlit, popular nature trail in a tropical paradise.
Right.
You're meticulously prepared. You are highly responsible, and, you are expected back at your host family's home in a matter of hours.
Exactly.
You have a charged phone, a camera, water, and cash. Now imagine that you simply vanish.
It is a truly baffling scenario.
It really is. You leave behind a pristine trail of digital evidence that records days of unseen terror and a physical aftermath that completely baffles investigators.
Yes, because you are left looking at a terrifying paradox.
A case where fragile electronics and paper survive the harsh jungle elements perfectly intact, but the humans carrying them do not.
It is a profound tragedy. And structurally, it presents one of the most complex forensic puzzles of the modern era.
Which is why we are doing this comprehensive analysis today.
Right. When you carefully evaluate the evidence left behind, you are immediately confronted with impossibilities. The environment of a Panamanian clouded forest is notoriously unforgiving.
Unforgiving is an understatement.
Exactly. Yet delicate items were preserved. The search response was immediate, massive, and highly specialized, yet it yielded absolutely nothing for weeks.
So the topic of our detailed exploration today is the 2014 disappearance and deaths of two Dutch students, Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon in Panama.
Yes.
The mission of this analysis is to strip away the noise. We want to cut through the endless internet speculation.
That is crucial here.
We are going to carefully construct a chronological timeline using only the verified facts, the recovered digital footprints, and the forensic evidence.
Right. We want to understand exactly what the objective data says happened in those clouded forests.
To do that effectively, we have to establish a behavioral baseline.
We do. Before we can even begin to understand the anomaly of their disappearance, we must understand exactly who these women were.
Because the way a person prepares for a trip dictates how authorities respond when they go missing.
Precisely. This was not some impromptu, careless excursion by inexperienced travelers.
Right. Let's look at who they were. From the verified documentation, we know Kris Kremers was 21 and Lisanne Froon was 22.
Both from the Netherlands.
Yes, they both grew up in Amersfoort in the province of Utrecht. But they weren't just casual friends passing time, were they?
No, not at all. They were incredibly driven young professionals transitioning into the next major phases of their lives.
Tell us about their backgrounds.
Well, Kris had an open, creative personality. She had just completed her studies specializing in art education at the University of Utrecht.
And Lisanne.
Lisanne was known for being highly intelligent, optimistic, and she was an avid volleyball player. She had recently earned her degree in applied psychology from Deventer.
So these are highly educated, motivated people.
Exactly. Only a few weeks before leaving for Panama, they had actually moved into a shared dorm room together, and they worked side by side at a local cafe called In Den Kleinen Hop.
So you have two goal-oriented individuals, and it's my understanding that this trip to Panama was heavily planned.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't just buy a ticket on a whim.
Right, they had been saving up for it.
They saved their cafe earnings for 6 entire months to fund this specific trip. It was designed as a special holiday to celebrate Lisanne's graduation.
But it wasn't just a vacation, right? It had a distinct purpose.
Yes. They were traveling to Panama to immerse themselves in the Spanish language and to volunteer their time working with local children.
That level of preparation, it makes what happens next so jarring.
It really does.
They arrived in Panama on March 15th, 2014. And for the first 2 weeks, everything went exactly to plan.
Without a single incident.
Right. They toured the country, and then on March 29th, they arrived in the town of Boquete in the Chiriquí province.
The plan was to live with a local family for a month while doing their volunteer work.
Which brings us to the morning of April 1st. The verified timeline places them setting out around 11:00 a.m. to hike the Pianista Trail.
This trail navigates the dense clouded forest surrounding the Baru volcano just outside of Boquete.
And we know from witnesses that they had brunch with two young Dutch men prior to the hike.
Yes, and they even posted on Facebook about their intentions to explore the area.
They also took a dog with them, didn't they?
They did! A dog that belonged to the owners of the local Il Pianista restaurant.
It's like reading the first chapter of a meticulously researched travel itinerary that suddenly goes entirely blank without warning.
That is exactly what it feels like.
You have two responsible women who simply ceased to exist on the map. But because they were so responsible, their absence was noticed almost instantly.
Right.
If you are the type of person who saves for 6 months to volunteer, you don't just skip out on your obligations.
Precisely. That behavioral baseline is what triggered the alarms. The very next day, April 2nd, they missed a scheduled appointment with a local guide.
And for Kris and Lisanne, missing an appointment was entirely out of character.
Completely. The local community recognized this red flag immediately.
So what does the immediate response look like? Because it seems like the authorities didn't wait around.
The response was remarkably rapid and massive. By April 6th, which is just 5 days after they stepped onto the trail, their parents had flown from the Netherlands to Panama.
And they didn't come alone, did they?
No, they did not. They were accompanied by police, specialized search dog units, and international detectives.
That is a massive deployment.
It was. A full-scale, coordinated search of those forests was launched and sustained for 10 consecutive days. The parents even established a $30,000 reward for information.
Here is where I need you to explain the mechanics of this environment.
Okay.
How do international detectives, specialized search dogs, and local authorities spend 10 days searching for two people and find absolutely nothing?
To understand that failure, you have to understand the specific topography of a Panamanian clouded forest.
Because it's not just a standard woodland.
Not at all. The terrain surrounding the Baru volcano consists of incredibly steep ravines, fast-moving rivers, and vegetation so dense it creates a physical wall.
But the primary obstacle is the canopy overhead, right?
Yes, the canopy is the major issue.
Because it blocks out the light.
It blocks light, yes. But more importantly for search and rescue, it completely nullifies aerial surveillance.
Oh.
Searching a clouded forest from the air is like trying to spot a dropped coin through a thick mattress.
That makes sense.
The vegetation is so tightly woven that helicopters and thermal imaging cameras are rendered almost entirely useless.
And what about sound? Can't they just shout?
Well, the immense moisture in the air and the density of the underbrush act as an acoustic sponge.
Acoustic sponge.
Yes. If you are at the bottom of a ravine shouting for help, that sound is swallowed by the forest within mere meters.
That is terrifying.
You could have a search team passing incredibly close by, and neither of you would ever know the other was there.
So while those physical search parties were painstakingly combing that impenetrable green maze, something much darker was happening invisibly.
Yes, it was.
The women's mobile devices were quietly recording a terrifying chronological log of their crisis.
The data recovered from their phones later tells us exactly when the hike became a fight for survival.
The digital forensics provide a chillingly precise timeline.
They do. Approximately 6 hours into their hike on April 1st, the situation deteriorated to the point of requiring emergency intervention.
And we know this because they attempted to dial the emergency numbers.
Exactly. They dialed 112, the international emergency number, and 911, the national emergency number in Panama.
The exact timestamps are, they're haunting to think about.
Very much so.
If you've ever been hiking and felt that sudden realization that you were in trouble, you know the instinct to reach for your phone.
Right. Kris's iPhone dialed out first at 16.39, so that's 4.39 p.m.
And then Lisanne's phone.
12 minutes later, Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy dialed out at 16.51, which is 4.51 p.m.
But neither call connected.
No, there was zero cellular reception.
The timing here is critically important to analyze.
It is. At 4.39 p.m. in early April in Panama, there is still ample daylight.
So they weren't just lost in the dark.
No, this indicates that their emergency was not simply a matter of the sun going down and losing the trail in the dark. It was a sudden, acute event.
Because both phones were utilized within a 12-minute window.
Exactly. That means whatever happened was undeniable and required immediate outside help.
And their isolation is confirmed over the next several days. The phone logs show a desperately disciplined attempt to find a signal.
Yes, very disciplined.
On April 4th, Lisanne's Samsung phone battery becomes entirely exhausted sometime after 5 in the morning.
And that device is never used again.
From April 5th through April 11th, the only device with power is Kris's iPhone.
Right. It is turned on multiple times over those days, clearly to check the network.
But here is the anomaly that absolutely demands an explanation.
The PIN code.
Yes. From April 5th onward, the correct PIN code is never entered into Kris's iPhone again.
The PIN code anomaly is one of the most heavily scrutinized data points in this entire forensic record.
I can see why.
Up until April 5th, the phone was being unlocked normally. After April 5th, either no PIN is entered at all, meaning someone just turned the screen on to check for signal bars, or a wrong PIN is entered.
And then it powers off eventually.
Finally, on April 11th, the iPhone is turned on at 10:51 a.m. and then turned off for the absolute final time at 11:56 a.m.
Wait, let me push back on this.
Okay.
If you are trapped in the wilderness with your best friend, wouldn't you share your PIN code?
You would think so, yes?
I mean, or does this incorrect PIN entry suggest severe environmental delirium, extreme physical exhaustion, or, something else entirely?
It is the most vital question to ask. While third-party involvement is often speculated upon, you have to analyze the physiological reality of surviving for days in a clouded forest.
Right.
Without adequate shelter, clean water, or food, the human body deteriorates rapidly.
Look at temperature.
The temperatures at that specific altitude drop significantly at night, leading to a high probability of hypothermia.
And hypothermia impacts brain function, right?
Severely. Prolonged exposure, combined with extreme dehydration, leads directly to severe cognitive impairment.
So they wouldn't be thinking clearly.
Not at all. Delirium, confusion, and memory loss are standard medical symptoms of this kind of environmental trauma. It is entirely scientifically plausible that Kris was incapacitated or deceased by April 5th, and Lisanne was attempting to access the phone to call for help, but literally could not remember the code.
Even if Kris had previously told her.
Exactly. Alternatively, the extreme physical exhaustion may have degraded fine motor skills to the point where typing a sequence of numbers was impossible.
That is just awful to consider. But just as the timeline of the phone battery starts to dwindle toward that final power down on April 11th, a different piece of digital evidence suddenly activates.
The camera?
Yes, exactly 1 week after they vanish. On the night of April 8th, Lisanne's digital camera is used in a way that is profoundly unsettling.
Between the hours of 19:00 and 22:00, so from 7 p.m. to 10:00 p.m., exactly 90 flash photographs were taken in the span of 3 hours.
That is essentially one intensely bright flash every 2 minutes.
Yes.
And the setting of these photos is terrifying to look at. They are taken deep in the jungle, in near-complete pitch darkness.
The flash illuminates the immediate foreground, maybe a few feet of rock and vegetation.
But beyond that, the background is an impenetrable wall of black.
Right. When you systematically analyze the contents of these photographs, you find a mixture of terrain and strange, deliberate arrangements.
Tell us about what was in the photos.
The images reveal a river or a rocky ravine. One photo shows a twig with plastic bags placed deliberately on top of a rock.
Like a signal.
Yes. Another image shows what appears to be a backpack strap. There is a photo of a mirror resting on a rock, and most distressingly, there is one photograph that clearly illuminates the back of Kris's head.
We have to analyze the why here.
We do.
Why use the precious remaining battery power of a digital camera to take 90 photos in the pitch dark, a full week into a survival situation?
Forensic experts look at the utility of the action. Two primary theories emerge regarding the mechanics of survival in that environment.
What's the first theory?
The first is that the camera's flash was being utilized as a makeshift strobe light.
To signal for help.
Exactly. If they were trapped at the bottom of a ravine at night and they heard the faint sounds of a search team or helicopter overhead, an intense burst of light is one of the only ways to signal a location through that dense canopy.
Because, like you said earlier, sound wouldn't travel.
Right. Sound wouldn't travel, but a sudden flash of light might catch someone's eye.
And what is the second theory?
Navigation and situational awareness. In the absolute pitch black of a jungle ravine, a camera flash provides a split second of intense, localized illumination.
So they were trying to see where they were going.
It is highly probable they were using the flash to briefly see their immediate surroundings, perhaps to navigate hazardous terrain, or out of a psychological need to check the darkness for nocturnal predators.
That makes total sense.
Furthermore, the specific photograph of the plastic bags arranged on a twig strongly suggests a deliberate attempt to create a visual marker or a signal.
Which points to a conscious mindset of survival and communication.
Yeah.
Even a week into the ordeal.
It absolutely does.
The devices that recorded this harrowing timeline, the phones and that camera, were eventually found.
Yes, they were.
But their condition stands in bizarre, almost impossible contrast to the physical remains that were recovered nearby.
This brings us to the discovery of the physical evidence, which didn't happen until 10 weeks after they vanished.
June 14th.
Right. On June 14th, the search parameters completely shifted. A local woman turned in Lisanne's blue backpack, reporting that she had found it resting by a riverbank near the village of Alto Romero.
Which is located in the Bocas del Toro province.
Correct.
The contents of this backpack present a massive contradiction.
We really do.
Inside, investigators found 2 pairs of sunglasses, $88 in cash, Lisanne's paper insurance card, a water bottle, Lisanne's camera containing those 90 flash photos, 2 bras, and both of the mobile phones.
And crucially, every single item inside the backpack was in good condition.
That is the part that is so hard to comprehend. The electronics were fully intact, which is what allowed the data recovery. The paper insurance card and the cash were perfectly legible.
The backpack provided the first tangible geographical anchor the authorities had seen since the morning of April 1st. It allowed search teams to concentrate their efforts along the Culebra River.
But what they found next is where the facts seem to defy physical science.
It does. A few kilometers away from where the backpack was discovered, Kris's denim shorts were found neatly sitting atop a rock on the opposite bank of the tributary.
And then more evidence was found later, right?
Yes. 2 months later, authorities discovered a pelvis and a boot that still contained a human foot, located closer to where the backpack had been found.
This is incredibly difficult to hear.
It is. Ultimately, at least 33 widely scattered bones were recovered along that same riverbank. DNA testing definitively confirmed they belonged to Kris and Lisanne.
The forensic reality of those remains is extremely grim.
Very grim. Only about 10% of Lisanne's skeleton and a mere 5% of Kris's skeleton were ever recovered.
Meaning over 90% of their physical bodies simply vanished into the environment.
Sad.
Stop for a second and think about the impossibility of that.
It is an incredible disparity.
It's like finding a perfectly sealed, undamaged time capsule resting directly in the center of a disaster zone.
That is a very accurate way to describe it.
How does a paper insurance card and an iPhone survive the incredibly wet, harsh jungle elements for 10 weeks inside a standard, non-waterproof backpack, while human remains in the exact same environment are utterly devastated and dispersed to such an extreme degree?
That disparity is the central forensic anomaly that investigators still grapple with. It all comes down to taphonomy.
Taphonomy. Can you explain what that is?
Taphonomy is the scientific study of how organisms decay and become preserved or dispersed in an environment.
Okay.
In a high-energy river system within a jungle, taphonomic expectations are very clear. Fast-moving water acts like a rock tumbler.
So things get smashed around.
Yes. You expect a specific sequence of decay, scavenging by local fauna, and violent skeletal dispersal.
Meaning the bones should show the violence of the river.
Exactly. But a Panamanian forensic anthropologist noted a detail that completely defies those standard taphonomic expectations.
What was the detail?
When the recovered bones were placed under high magnification, they exhibited absolutely 0 discernible scratches.
0 scratches.
None. There were no marks of natural origin, meaning the bone showed no damage from being violently battered against the rocks in that fast-moving river.
That doesn't make any sense.
And there were no marks of cultural origin, meaning no tool marks, no weapon marks, and no evidence of foul play on the bone surface itself. The bones were entirely smooth and free of any marks whatsoever.
What is the scientific explanation for that? I mean, if they were in a river full of rocks for weeks, how is it physically possible for a bone to not have a single scratch?
That is precisely the question that prevents a definitive conclusion. For a bone to travel through a high-energy, rocky river system and emerge without a microscopic scratch is statistically highly improbable.
So what does it suggest?
It suggests the remains were deposited or protected in a way that circumvented the natural friction of the environment, but the exact mechanism remains entirely unknown.
The official assessments seem to reflect this profound lack of physical clarity.
They do. Dutch authorities, working alongside forensic and search and rescue investigators, initially posited that the students likely suffered a fatal accident, perhaps falling from a cliff or down a steep ravine after becoming lost.
But the Panamanian authorities faced a lot of scrutiny, didn't they?
Yes, they faced extremely heavy criticism for their handling of the disappearance and the initial preservation of the search areas.
And in the end, no official conclusion was reached.
Ultimately, because the physical evidence is so incredibly fragmented, contradictory, and lacking in taphonomic logic, no official cause of death has ever been definitively ruled by the authorities.
It remains a tragedy heavily defined by its rigid yet incomplete data points.
That is the crux of it. The objective digital footprints, the emergency call logs, the camera timestamps, the DNA confirmations, they provide an absolute framework of when these events occurred.
Right. We know the exact minute the crisis began, and we know the exact night the camera was utilized.
But the physical condition of the recovered evidence steadfastly refuses to explain how or why the final outcomes occurred.
We've traced the trajectory of 2 remarkable women who embarked on a highly planned, celebratory trip to volunteer their time.
A trip that took a terrible turn.
We followed the verified timeline from from the sunny morning of April 1st, through the immediate and frantic attempts to contact emergency services as daylight still burned, to a haunting series of midnight photographs a full week later.
And we have analyzed a thoroughly perplexing physical reality that offers a pristine digital record, but a devastated physical outcome.
Consider the bizarre, almost contradictory nature of the wilderness we have discussed today. It is an environment capable of completely protecting fragile electronics, cash, and a delicate paper card inside a simple backpack for over 2 months.
It is truly baffling.
Yet simultaneously, it is an environment capable of erasing 90 to 95% of two human beings, scattering what little is left without leaving a single microscopic scratch on the remaining bone to tell the story. What does that immense disparity truly reveal about the forces at work in those clouded forests?
It is something you really have to think about.
Thanks for listening.